which I'm happy to say spent 10 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list earlier this year. However, the New York Times has, thank you, thanks. Thank you very much. New York Times, though, has refused to review it. However, they'll still impose Paul Krugman on us every week. That we're not going to be spared. That every week we're definitely going to get him. But no dissent is allowed in the New York Times. But on the other hand, I think we all know about the financial picture the New York Times is facing. So I tend to think it doesn't want to promote a book that argues against bailouts, given what the media is obviously going to be demanding in the near future. Well, let's not talk about that particular depressing subject. And in fact, I hope I'm not going to depress you today, because I am going to leave you with the suggestion that there is a way out of this. Now, whether or not they're going to follow it is another question. But it's comforting to know that if we wanted to get out of this economic mess, we could do it. It's not impossible. It can be done. Now, I'm not going to talk about some of the things that you would likely encounter if you turned on right-wing radio, where you'd hear a lot of denunciation of the Community Reinvestment Act that introduced affirmative action in lending, or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, whose irresponsible decisions were, I think, a fairly significant factor in all this. But all the same, there is nevertheless the elephant in the living room, the factor that more than any other contributed to the crisis, but yet that never gets mentioned, is never mentioned in a negative light, certainly in political circles, where, in fact, to the contrary, we're in effect encouraged not even to think about it, and that's the Federal Reserve System. Now, most Americans hear Federal Reserve System and they think, I don't even know what this is. I'm never going to know. This is probably too complicated, and I better just let the experts take care of this. Well, that's the problem. The experts are a bunch of quacks. So it's important for us to learn this material, to know what's going on, so that we can have an informed opinion, so that we won't inadvertently enlist in the army of drones who say that the solution to the crisis is to give more power to our wise overlords. Been there, done that. The Federal Reserve System is, in effect, in charge of the country's money supply, as I'm sure I don't need to tell people in this room. It has the ability to increase or decrease it. I think we all know the direction it normally goes. It is supposed to act as a lender of last resort for the financial sector. Well, there's one thing it knows how to do, right? We've seen that. That's no problem. They got that pretty well under control. And we're told that the Fed is a great stabilizing agent in the economy. So really, we shouldn't really be questioning it, because the Fed brings scientific management to bear on our money supply. I mean, who could question that? What kind of crank are you, after all? You know, this is for our own good. Even the left, which prides itself on its slogan, "Question authority," falls completely silent when it comes to the Fed. If you question the Fed, well, that's taking question authority just a little bit too far. Well, I intend to do that. I think those of us in this room are inclined not just to accept whatever we're fed by the establishment, especially when the establishment has been obviously so wrong. So we're inclined to ask fundamental questions that are normally passed over. So, for example, normally what happens when there's an economic crisis of this kind is that we get people on one side saying we need fiscal stimulus. We got to just blow a lot of borrowed money on nonsense projects, and that'll make us rich. And then the other side is supposed to say, oh, no, let's just print up a lot of money and spend it on such and such. And that's the big debate. That's the debate. But yet we are introducing into this debate a third possibility, which is that the first two are completely juvenile and are only going to make the situation worse. Now, what I'm going to be talking to you about today, though, involves something called the Austrian School of Economics. This has nothing to do with Austria per se, other than a lot of the early figures in the school came from Austria. Now, this is important because right now the Austrian school, which is a school of economic thought, is the smallest probably in the world. It also happens to be the oldest continuously existing school of thought in the world, and right now it's the fastest growing. Why? Because disproportionately, economists of the Austrian school predicted what we're seeing at a time when the rest of the profession was completely blindsided. James Galbraith estimates that maybe 1/10 or 1/100% of professional economists saw this crisis coming. Now, naturally, he's not including the Austrian economists, because that's the job of James Galbraith, to pretend there are no Austrian economists. But we need to We need to highlight these people because they did see what's coming, and that's why people are interested in them. Meanwhile, the mainstream, so-called, of the economics profession has, in my opinion, completely disgraced itself during this crisis. Not only because it failed to see it coming, not only because they told us this is the most robust economy anyone's ever seen, they said that in 2007, but also because the solutions, so-called solutions they propose, as I say, are utterly juvenile and extremely crude. And this is all they have to show for themselves. Now, the mainstream of the economics profession has, in effect,